So, Stephen, you put this together.
Yeah.
When did you put it together, and what does all this mean? Where'd you get all
So
this?
that was 2013 when I started working on the timeline that was, between all the prophets that I was listening to. And it was their wording through different things. And, even we talked about Tom Horn and his prophecy. I wasn't a Tom Horn fan, and
the Trump train?
very
Speaking of Tom Horn,
I'm very adamant about I wasn't a huge Tom Horn fan.
yeah.
But I was also, one of the studies I'd done was the last Pope prophecy. And that one really intrigued me because at the time we had the Pope before this one. What was it? I forget his name. The one that stepped down. So,
Right, yeah.
And
Now
so
he's the
yeah.
He's like the German guy, right?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
And so
he's got the weird face, but I can't remember who his
Yeah.
name is.
But when I
Not
came
that
across
Pope Francis is beautiful, but
no,
still.
but he's better. But I'd come across this prophecy back in 2011, and so I just kind of wrote it down, and it was interesting because it was saying that this next pope would be, and this prophecy was written, man, I want to say 500 AD
Yeah,
or something. It was a while back. It wasn't like this was a recent prophecy.
Yeah.
But it had got down to this one was going to be the next to the last. So after him was the last one. And so
Right.
when God was speaking in this timeline a little bit, like, well, these are the dates that God keeps steering me to. Well, they don't really work because this one still hasn't been fulfilled. And how do you get rid of a pope? Like
Yeah.
they usually they usually die in office. They don't step down.
Yeah.
And he was relatively young. And so I was like, well, man, this guy's going to be around for another, 30 years.
Right.
Well, lo and behold, Tom Horn makes this, prophecy statement that says,
Well,
hey,
he-
this pope is going to step down in
Very powerful
2012.
statement. He published it in a book.
He did. He published it, and I didn't read the whole book, but I read enough of it to go, I hope he's on to something, because then this actually kind of works. And then 2012 came and went.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, well, man, that guy was completely off, and I wasn't a fan to begin with.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, then 2013 happens, and I wake up one day, and lo and behold, here's on the news that the Pope is stepping down.
Right.
Come on.
I mean, literally, I told you guys, I was like, I sat there and watched that, and I remember watching that evening and watching them take, the vote and everything that they were doing, and then lightning hits the basilica.
Yeah.
And if that's not God talking to you, saying, hey, you better pay attention to this moment in time. And that's where a lot of Christians don't realize what they see. Like, these signs from God are there. He puts them in front of you. It's up to you spiritually to discern what's he trying to tell you.
That's right.
He was trying to tell me something that night that I wrote down and said, this is an extremely important time in Christianity right now to put this in a side note.
So let me just throw this in there too, because anybody that's looking at this and saying, how could you be so brazen to put a timeline and actually put tribulation and stuff like that in there? And we're talking about the second coming of Christ when we're doing this timeline. And, the Bible specifically says that God gives us signs, and so that and the moon and the sun and the stars, so that we can determine the seasons, right?
Correct.
And it's interpreted appointments, like divine appointments, meaning, and we go back to the first coming of Christ. There were men watching in the skies. They had been studying, right? Three men. There you go. We can agree on that.
They were 3 foreigners to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So
And
they weren't
We've never been to Jerusalem.
soon. But they were 3 foreigners to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
That they were watching for the signs of the coming Messiah.
Right. And the very people that
That should have been watching.
missed it.
Yes.
And so it's not that the information wasn't there. It's people were not looking for it. They weren't seeking it. And there's one thing that God promises. It's his promises are true, is that if you will seek me, you will find me. If you seek truth, you will find truth.
Correct.
They're hidden mysteries. The term mystery alone is just hidden truth, meaning the truth is there. You just have to search for it and you will find it. And I think that between all these conversations that we've had, that you started landing on truths And then obviously things that I started, I'll put it like this. We talk about Kim Clement and we'll play a couple of his clips, but that 14 years, he says it's a Joseph period, meaning it's 7 years of grace followed by 7 years of judgment, right? He says, and you have to understand, Kim passed in 2016. When he says this, he says, I'm in 2018. I find it comical and unique that AOC even says we got 12 years left, right? So she's already setting up this idea that there's going to be some kind of catastrophic event because of climate and climate change, and she's trying to create her own narrative for her followers.
Well, there's always been a big deal about 2030.
That's right.
And 2030 has always been one of the globalist agenda of domination. I mean, you can find so many. Are you like, we don't even have to put an article up. Just go Google it. Yeah. That's how many are out there. But 2030 has always been like, hey, we're going to colonize Mars by 2030.
Yeah.
We're gonna do all these things by 2030. 2030 is our big year, and that was always a big question mark of me. Like, what's so special about 2030?
Yeah.
Unless you know Revelation, and you know prophecy, and you keep up with the times. And that's what Jesus said in Luke. He's like, hey, if you were awake and you knew what season you were in, he's like, you can predict the weather, but you can't even predict me being here in front of you in flesh, that I'm standing here with you and you don't even discern this. Yeah. Like, he was standing right there in front of them. They couldn't discern it. And that's a big deal to us is like, I get this a lot. Like, nobody knows the day or the hour. Like, we get that. Yeah. Like, we're no place up here. We
Doesn't say anything about the week.
A day or an hour, like a week, like a month. Like, this is a timeline of a season. Correct. Like, we're just saying, look, wake up, because this season that God is waking up so many people.
Yes, they is.
I mean, with the dreams and the visions and things that are going on right now in Christianity, and they don't look like.
And I think what you've done and what I've done, and probably yourself, is we have written down things that we have heard. Has nothing to do with making a full commitment to this item. But when you hear something that kind of triggers,
it just makes sense.
Yeah, you write it down and you say, I'm going to follow this and see what happens. And what it does is it establishes, number one, God doesn't do anything unless he informs his prophets first. You have to understand that there are modern day prophets. We're going to go, we've got episodes loaded up, but we're going to be going over all of these guys that are experiencing these moments. And it says in the last days, God's going to give people dreams and visions. Right. And it's like,
it's biblical.
And it just, now it's starting, and you can start tying these things together, and you're realizing that God is speaking so loudly, yet no one is hearing him. And it's amazing that we're at that point that we've deafened our ears. We may have covered our ears. I don't know. But I believe that there's enough of us out here that really are wanting to kind of sound the alarm. And
I think that's a big
trumpet,
deal. I think that's a big deal with us about talking about where we're at right now in America. I mean, with all the upheaval and all the things that are going on, like I told you guys the other night, the worst thing the church could do is go back to normal.
Yeah.
And that's what they're driving for. We just need to get back to normal. And it's like, no, you don't understand.
Understand the season.
Understand the season. Be awake. That's the worst thing we could do right now, is go back to teaching everything that we've been teaching the last 20 years. Like, God is trying to set you up to say, look, I've got something different to say right now. And if you're listening, he'll give it to you.
Yeah. And so that timeline, we're going to be producing or putting up every show just to but we wanted to give you a glimpse on what we're seeing. And when I say we, I mean Brandon and Steven. I'm just here tagging along.
Here we go. Like, cop
no,
out.
But
I do want to say something about the 2030 and colonizing Mars.
Okay.
I always tell my friends, shoot for the moon. And if you miss, you'll at least colonize Mars.
No, but I want to say a lot of our timeline, too, is solidified in a lot of what Kim Clement has said. And so we want to establish Kim in that's what these clips are, is just saying, look, you listen to this and you can see this guy was seeing things and hearing things, and it's not, and now it's not random.